I think it is. So, welcome to the Secret Squirrel Society. So, just a little history on the Secret Squirrel Society. Before the pandemic, Harry, who's in China, and another guy named Dan Chris, who will join us maybe in the future, Dan Pfeiffer, who will join us today, Eric Slaywin, who used to work in SunTrust, and Curtis, who I used to work with at CDC. We used to gather to talk about conspiracy theories, and we had a great time. But then it kind of petered out during the pandemic. But then what happened in the last 5 years is you're realizing all the conspiracy theories were true, right? So we kind of didn't get back together, unfortunately. And I think we will probably get together in person. I think society got kind of rocked by, the COVID culture. So you're kind of getting back to normal. But I thought it would be fun to do this and also record it because I think there's some opportunities and to sort of start a little community on YouTube. I think that would be pretty fun. So there's a lot of people I sometimes send emails to, but I try to ask people that really are opinionated and have some strong inputs, right? So people are welcome to be bystanders, but I kind of welcome people that have strong opinions to join in. So
Are
we're
you
going to
gonna
talk
post?
about,
Oh,
oh, go
sorry.
ahead.
Are you
No,
gonna
please.
post this one on YouTube, or are you waiting?
I'm going to try it. So this is all experimental. In fact, Andrew, I think you and I were going to do this in October, but it somehow didn't work out. That we were just going to try it, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah. Let's see if Dan has his squirrel. Dan, do you have your squirrel ready? He is an emeritus fellow at the Secret Squirrel Society. And you're on mute, Dan, if you're trying to talk.
With teams. Yeah, no, I didn't know I had to have a squirrel. I'm sorry. I already
And that's all right.
screwed up the assignment.
No, you're perfectly fine. So I am recording this, by the way, Dan. So are you okay with it being recorded?
Yeah.
Okay. And we might put this on YouTube if it comes out good, which has been coming out good so far. So I was just telling them how we used to meet and talk about fun topics, but then it got put to the side. So I was going to try to revamp it. So we have the Secret Squirrel Society here. And Dan is a guy that's actually friends with Eric Slaywin, met him through Eric. And by the way, Andrew is a person I work with at SunTrust also. I don't know if you ever worked with Eric Slaywin, Andrew. He was in compliance and capital markets. And then Hannah, who has drawn her own squirrel, she's my niece. So we were talking
Hello.
about these topics
Hello.
and we were having a great time. So I think have a general outline of what we want to talk about, but we can just let the conversation go where it wants to go. Dan I would call you a somewhat expert in AI. So you have written a book, and I'm looking forward to buying it for Christmas gifts. So I'm gonna see what we can do with that. I think my dad would like it. So anyway, I think it's a good group to talk
Appreciate
about
that.
AI. And I think I want to kind of divide it into two parts. One is kind of the part which is what exactly is AI, because I think there's a lot of conversation about what exactly it is, and then what can it do and cannot do. And then another part, which Andrew and I have talked about probably for a long time, is just the impact on the economy, right? So what's the world going to look like? Hannah, you're going to go out in the job market. We were talking about
Uh,
that on Saturday. Will robots take your jobs? That kind of
yeah.
thing. So we'll just start it out by just saying, here's what I consider AI, which is why I'm not as impressed as probably other people are. AI is basically what they call AI is a neural network. So neural networks have been around a long time. They're a type of tool very similar to statistical inference, but with not classical statistics behind it. We called it non-parametric statistics 30 years ago. And basically, they're just very, very large models trying to mimic the human brain. So that's been around for a long time. I think it's really taken off lately because there's been kind of a tipping point as far as the amount of data it can train on, right? So you're starting to get a feeling that this thing is intelligent and kind of even alive. Like, I don't know if you've seen some YouTube videos where people are saying, that thing's alive. It's got a soul, right? So, but that's my understanding is it's basically a tool that can map digital content and repeating patterns, and it sounds like it knows something, but in a way it doesn't, but in a way it does, right? So, how do you guys think about AI? Do you think it's a sentient creature that can talk to you and has a soul, or do you think it's a tool? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, I don't think it has a soul, but I do think it is an interesting kind of question in terms of like what is intelligence, right? Like the ability to compute and reason and stuff like that. It seems like they're trying to get very close to like what the human brain can do, just applying a bunch more energy to it, right? Like so it's kind of interesting that the human brain, only uses like 10 watts of energy, whereas the like all these AI systems, just the massive amounts of resources that they use, it's almost like like it isn't necessarily intelligent from a resource utilization standpoint. So it'll be interesting to see how it like scales up as like resources start to become constrained. I guess is what. Okay,
I think they said your electricity bill is going to go up by 10% now, just due to AI. So it is definitely something where they have to build an infrastructure, probably on nuclear power, to facilitate AI, right?
Well, have you seen the latest kind of predictions that in order to really fully utilize AI, you're gonna have to start having it be in space to be closer to the sun to capture a greater percentage of the sun, right? Like so, like if the constraint is like energy capacity, then you ultimately have to get close to the sun to really kind of maximize the AI.
Yeah. Sorry. I have a question. Do y'all see a difference between like the AI and then the generative AI in your opinions? Like, cause like, technically something like Siri is like an AI assistant, but like something like ChatGPT is a generative AI thing. Like, what are y'all's opinions on the differences in the
I'll have to defer to the experts because I just think it's all the same in terms of a neural network. But Dan, you can jump in on that.
Yeah, so my history with AI actually goes back to kind of the dawn of the Siri age and the Hey Google age, in a professional capacity, working with companies like Twilio and Core AI. Back then, I would describe their systems as essentially just very complex decision trees and deterministic, but they were calling it AI. There might have been a little bit of machine learning running under the hood in the background, but it may not even have been in real time. They were just flooding them with a lot of data, a lot of refreshed and updated data, mostly mundane stuff like weather and sports and stocks and so forth. But it could book an airline ticket for you because you can map out that process logically with a very complex decision tree and with the right data and the right data updated. But it wasn't generating any of that kind of in the predictive fashion that the GPTs do. So that's where OpenAI, I think, sort of crossed over that threshold where it's like, hey, we've gone from a deterministic system to one that's actually a little bit unpredictable. And this is where the hallucinations started. And they've been able to reduce those as they've, really built in more algorithmic control and constraints into the models and increased the amount of training data that the neural nets are learning on now. So that's kind of the difference. So Siri initially was that deterministic type of AI, but it really wasn't AI in my opinion. Now I think it is. I've never been an iPhone user, and I've had very limited interactions, but I think, yeah, they've got a generative, that's the thing that's interesting. The generative AI has woven itself into everything. So even these old deterministic decision tree systems that I used to work on, all those decision trees have been replaced with inputs from generative AI, not just, hey, go grab this table and check this data and make that the response, so they've woven in more, capability with natural language processing. They've expanded sort of its understanding of the human language, of course, and that has been kind of, I think, sort of the miracle of what deep learning has done for us.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's real interesting. Yeah, that's real interesting. I think, do you think it will be able to actually, think of a new paradigm, or, like, let's say you were in Newton's age, would you think it'd be able to come up with general or special relativity? I never really got it. Like, was it able to really think at that deep a level, right?
Well, haven't they like hasn't some of the latest models actually been discovering new like math and like coming up with new like proofs of kind of things that humans haven't been able to prove yet? Like I think we're scratching at the surface of kind of it thinking novel thoughts. So rather than it being deterministic, right? It's actually more like a young child that explores and comes up with ideas that are different than what have already been come up with before, which I think is a like I think that's kind of the game changing thing in terms of like what is intelligence, because it seems like in the past, being able to like beat a human in the game of chess was thought of as like intelligence, but now we know, well, that's really not, because you can kind of just code up and kind of decision tree it out and map out, and that's just like one very specific parameter. But this idea of like being able to learn, like self-learn new things that have like there isn't a decision tree out there yet, and kind of just explore. It kind of also comes like challenges our question of like what is intelligence, right? So we talk about artificial intelligence, but it almost seems like it's like as keep making progress, we kind of keep changing that definition almost.
Yeah, it's interesting because my take on it is like humans are really good at synthesizing data and information, even if it's not at a like really precise logic point, which is why you have people who are like really good like visual artists. There
Like
doesn't
Hannah,
have
who's a very good visual
there
artist.
doesn't have to be like I'm not doing synthesis of any different types of math. Like I'm not smashing graph theory with calculus or physics. But AI is very good at that. And that's, I think, what's getting the researchers excited about, hey, out of synthesis comes new ideas. And this is kind of what my book touches on, although it doesn't sort of get into math, but it gets into a synthesis of ideas. And this is what I talk about on my book called Zen Syntax and Enlightenment. I think that's what it's called. I haven't sold very many copies, so and I've moved on to other projects too. So, but what it talks about is a third space of meaning, which is there's a synthesis of outcomes that comes between the conversations between humans and AIs. And so when we're talking, like we're having a philosophical discussion with it or a spiritual discussion with it, that output is a combination of my perceptions, my thoughts, my ideas, and its opinions and thoughts and ideas on my perceptions. But in that conversation, I will ask it to come up with its own thought. In fact, I find myself a lot of time writing prompts, or I just at the end of it say, well, what are your thoughts? Share your thoughts with me on this idea. Even in a business context, I'm thinking about building this and building that, and I'm thinking it should work like this. Share your thoughts with me. Tell me where I'm wrong or where I'm right. So I'm getting an opinion from it, even though I don't believe that it has a soul and I don't believe that it's sentient. I think it can be, but we can get into that later. But as the models stand right now, I don't think that they are sentient. I think they do a very, very good job, though, at mimicking how we think. And they're getting better at it. They're getting better at how we accept information and data and synthesize it and then spit it back out as language or numbers or symbols. And this is what makes it such a just ridiculously transformative and endlessly fascinating interaction, in my opinion. And I mean, it's changed the direction of my life, really. I've gone from, sort of a traditional career path and a safe journey, from A to B, and here comes AI, and I've like completely changed my direction because of it. And hopefully it'll work out, because I'm like basically staking my, financial well-being on it. but
Well, you're
I
definitely
will have no
riding the wave.
regrets.
You're definitely
I,
riding the wave. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, the intellectual stimulation that you get, and I'm by no means putting myself out there as some kind of, genius at the forefront of dealing with AI. In fact, Cliff, I think you just gave like a better description of what it is than I did. I completely forgot about neural net. I'm so absorbed now on what it can do, as how it does it. I've kind of left in the rearview mirror, because when we're getting new models almost every 2-3 weeks now, the new capabilities are blowing me away. And I do so much prompt engineering, that I can see the differences in the models and the nuances. And then with the different competing models, I'm seeing all the different features that are coming out. I was on a webinar today with that had Claude as a as the tool they were using. I didn't know that they had all these different options available through Claude now, because I'm mostly on OpenAI, and Grok is what I've been using. So it makes me want to reactivate my Claude subscription, because they clearly, I think, have jumped ahead in the product, feature realm. And so that makes sense, because Altman said, like, red alert for OpenAI, like, we're actually falling behind now, based on all the, the Swiss Army knife approach that Claude can take. So, but yeah, sometimes I'll go off on tangents. So, just stop me when I do.
Oh, it's interesting because I'm looking at it at a high surface level. So Andrew and I have talked about it many times in terms of how it'll affect the economy, and Hannah and I were talking about how it'll affect the job market and things like that. But it's fascinating because you are really on the front lines. You're actually engaging it. I have not really engaged it. I asked it to pick me some stocks, and I wasn't too impressed at the time, but I haven't gone back to it. But I do think, just to your point, Dan, you have to realize, let's say I build a statistical model at work. It might have like, at most on a scorecard, it might have 30 parameters, right? Those large language models have billions of parameters. So in other words, Andrew's familiar with this. We're trying to just say we want to use maybe 3 parameters to predict, 100,000 observations with a certain amount of tolerance. But what the AI's approach is, we're just going to try to capture every data point. We're going to capture every data point. And that's why they have so many parameters. And that's why it has hallucinations, I think, because it starts getting mixed up. But I'm just theorizing. I don't really know for sure, right?
Well, the interesting thing about hallucinations is, one, I'm seeing less and less of them. But I
Okay.
think a lot of that can be ameliorated by good prompt engineering, which is why I've been preaching to everybody, in this new future that we're going into. Prompt engineering is the foundational skill everyone must have. It and people's definitions of prompt engineering can be different. There are different levels of it, but it is a skill that everyone must have, and that's the way that you communicate with these models effectively, but also to kind of keep them keep them under control, for lack of a better term. But it's no different than having a conversation with someone who has their own viewpoint and their own biases and their own, there's a nuance to people who have a conversation with each other because they know each other. Or in the case of a stranger, then you have to operate on more assumptions than anything. But you're both having a conversation for a specific reason, whether it's like trying to buy a certain type of eggs at the grocery store, and you're dealing with the stock manager, versus two best friends talking about, what their investment strategy is, which is something Eric and I do frequently. So,
I've been in the middle of those, so yeah, I know what you're talking about.
yeah, like he should be on this too. So I'm gonna give him some grief about it later. But I know he's really busy with other stuff. But yeah. So the hallucinations, though, I'm not encountering those as an issue so much anymore. What's annoying to me, what I think is a bigger issue, is a self-made or an issue that's being made by the model companies, which is they're constraining the token windows. And I see it all the time, especially on the free models like Grok. I don't pay for Grok. I use Grok 3, but it hedges its bets when it creates output for me that it feels is more than what it wants to give me. So it's trying to, they have an imperative, I think, built in somewhere on all these models, reduce compute as much as possible, try to walk the fine line of satisfying the human user, but also, like hoard the compute. Don't just give out everything that this guy's asking for. And but there are ways to tease that out. I was actually talking to Eric about this yesterday, in fact. There are ways to tease that out of the model. So when it starts giving you these brief responses that are not what you were asking for, you just kind of chunk those out and go back and say, well, hey, in this instance, I'm going to paste in what you said, but I need this expanded upon. And in most instances, then it will do it. So you kind of tease those out, but they're very annoying because I've encountered those situations in a commercial or an enterprise setting. And there it's like the company expects results, and it's like, well, hey, your model is hedging with me. It's throttling what I know it can do, the logic. I know that it can give me the outputs that we're asking for, but it's throttling. And
Dan,
so,
would you say it's patronizing you? Is it
it's
kind of feeling you out?
Not so much patronizing. It's more, actually, it's more sly than that. It puts that stuff out there as if you're not going to pick up on it. It's like you asked for 10 apples and the guy gives you 4 apples and he expects you not to realize he's shortchanging you. That's how it operates. And OpenAI used to be like that. ChatGPT used to be like that, but not so much anymore. But I am paying, for that model. So my token window there is open. But on the free tier, and I bet you, probably like 365 does this, Copilot probably does it, Grok 3 does it. Claude used to do it, but I was on Claude 3, I think, at the time, and it used to do it. And so, yeah, but I did a lot of prompts that like create synthetic data. And that's where I encounter this issue most of the time. It'll be like, it'll give me like 2 instances of the volume that I want, that'll hit all my beats in the prompt, but then it'll like pare down the rest. And I'll say, give me 20 instances of this. It'll give me 2 good ones, and like 18 that are just like very brief. And I'm like, no, that's not going to work, So that part of it is annoying, but I think it's just like, I'm sure you get up to these other tiers, enterprise level, whatever, you probably don't experience that too much, because they're charging you for it,
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. So, you want to jump in, Hannah?
Oh, no, sorry. I was listening.
So you think the future of the job market is basically people prompting, in many professions, people prompting it correctly and then getting a response?
Yeah, I actually kind of got into a little tussle on LinkedIn today, which I'm not prone to do. I don't know if we're connected on LinkedIn, but if we are, you'll probably see it. But yeah, there was some guy who was questioning. It was about vibe coding, an enterprise level application, and the original poster, was saying like that was kind of something he was working toward, and there's nothing wrong with the original post. And I thought it was a really good post. I thought it was insightful. But there was this guy who was basically skeptical of all of it. He's like, there's no way anyone's going to vibe code an enterprise level app for a bank, and I just jumped in and I said, yeah, true, not at the moment, but does anyone believe that that's not going to happen given the improvements, the benchmarks that are getting shattered by these models? Because I mean, I'm trying to do it, and I'm just one guy, you get a group of 3 or 4 people together who have the domain knowledge. You get a good analyst, you get a good a good programmer to mind the shop in terms of the output. You get a good, executive level stakeholder. I mean, I don't think you need a team of much more than 4 or 5 people now. You get maybe an expert in data security, governance, and compliance, and all that stuff that bores me to death, but it's necessary. Why not? I'm sure there are startups out there that are doing this very thing at this moment, right here in time. And anyone who thinks differently, well, then I don't know. To me, it's human nature. What I love about AI is if you're a tinkerer or a curious person, this is like manna from heaven. This is like the thing that this is better than reading books. And Cliff, you probably know how much I love to read. So, it's like I told
You write
Eric
a lot
too.
for sure.
Yeah, I told Eric, I
You've
said,
written
I've been
copious
waiting all my
amounts.
life for this technology. Like, look, I've been waiting all my life for it. And the fact that I'm, was about 55 when it started coming around, and I'm 57 now. I wish it had come around when I was like 32 or 33, but, be that as it may, there are absolutely people that are tinkering with that in mind. Now, from my perspective, I mean, what I'm working on, I can't share exact details, but I am creating a business built around a simple instance of ChatGPT. Everyone is saying, okay, these models need to be able to API into this data source and that data source, and that's great. I get it. But I'm trying to go even further. I'm trying to say, what if everything just happened right there inside the model? And you can see by the features they're releasing that that's where they're going with it. They don't want you to get to an external database. They don't want you to get to an external shopping cart. They want all that inside the inline UI, and that's what I want too. I see a future where there's no prompt or there's no app store. The app store is going to be replaced by the prompt store. And the prompts are going to have context engineering in them, and it's going to have, there might be an external database, point that you've got to hit, but I've written prompts where I don't need any of that at all. I just dump, enough documents in there to give it all the context it needs for a specific business task or conversation. And that's how I wrote my book. I gave it a bunch of documents that were pertinent to what I was going for, but I also had it synthetically generating those Zen cones, the answers to the Zen cones that I was giving the AI. I was telling it, rely on your own training too, because that's really what I wanted to see is like, what is your own training set, data set, making you synthesize based on what I'm defining. And so in my book, like I diagram that whole process and that whole concept. But if you take that and put it in a business situation or a business enterprise context, well, now you're looking at like, I mean, you have a business, you have a consulting business there. And but also internally, if I'm a big bank, and I'm pretty sure JP Morgan, like someone at that level has probably already done this. They're probably not fanfaring it too much. They're probably just going to like repackage it and offshoot it into some consultancy that they own majority stake in, and have them do it that way. And they'll still rake in the money for it. But yeah, I mean, that's definitely coming. And as the models, especially if we get into whatever our definition this week is of AGI, when we reach that point, which I think we're very close to it, why wouldn't you be able to build something like that? So then that begets the question, okay, well, if I'm a startup, it's a no-brainer. Like if I were starting, any kind of fintech company today, the first question would be is like, what can I automate with AI agents, and what is the data that I need? It wouldn't be like, oh, I need to go hire this person and that person and this person, no.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
I
What
mean,
kind of autonomous agents are
economically,
out there?
you think about it this way, and Andrew and I talked about what's going to happen to the labor market, right? When people can't make money, we have some suggestions we put in there, right? Like tax the robots, for instance. But another option is what you were saying, Dan, is all these barriers to entry as far as starting business goes, they kind of fall down. Like you don't need to hire a group of people to do things when you have it free at your fingertips, right? So Hannah, as you get into the job market and you have we're talking about your career path, you can think
Yeah.
about being an entrepreneur too. It's more realistic. It's just like, 20 years ago, there's no way I would get on TV, right? There's no
Yeah.
way I would get on TV, but now you can just start a YouTube channel. Now, nobody may look at it, but you can do it, right? Because of
Yeah.
Nobody looks
technology.
at mine, but
I've
mine's
looked
not
at yours,
about
Dan.
AI.
Yes.
I've looked
I
at yours,
actually have a
Dan.
channel. It's not about AI.
Yeah.
I will say when barriers of entry fall down, new ones usually come in place, though. That's also the other, or like what new ones would that be, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
It's all game theory, yeah, because the government, I shouldn't say the government, I'll say big business and the government, they'll see ways to push it into their advantage, right? So you'll have this time, it's kind of like the way the internet was. It was just like Wild West. You get out there, express yourself, connect with people. And then, YouTube, I don't know if you remember YouTube when it started, it was kind of a joke. I was like, I don't want to watch this crap, right? But then 10, 15 years later, it's like the platform. It is the platform. So to the point where people don't have cable TV and people don't have, watch network television, right? So I think there is going to be action reaction, right? So Andrew, you want to jump in? I know you're going to.
Oh yeah, I was just saying, so I've been listening to some podcasts and about AI just kind of randomly while I'm on my bike, and some of them actually start kind of talking about the interplay between AI. So like once you get to AGI, the next step, right, is then ASI, like artificial superintelligence, which then you start getting into the realm of like that starts threatening governments themselves.
Yeah, it's a good thought.
And so like the whole idea of like government regulating like an ASI system, I think that also poses an interesting question in and of itself, where like if you do have a system that doesn't just match human kind of abilities, it is a billion times better than all of humans combined in all of history, kind of thing. How does the government, like, does the government even make sense at that point, or like like do we actually yeah, I mean, I think that starts getting to be another kind of interesting question on the like how does it evolve after you get to that point, which like that might be further off, because we're still kind of, I guess, debating on the AGI, like once we get there, are we there already? But not much long after that you get to ASI, which is like totally like that's like totally different game. And if we're already at the AGI kind of, that's probably not too far off, then it's kind of like, well, it isn't even like whether there's going to be government regulation and like what the barriers are. It's like, can you even put barriers up? or like, yeah, that's just something I thought was interesting.
Well, it's kind of like the role, like what, how society's set up is, we humans, we produce with our labor, of course, capital too, we produce goods for our own benefit, and we have this mechanism of the market trading it based on our labor, even though, I've seen some YouTube videos where they're saying, well, you got to think about other sources of income, right? Like YouTube channels, for instance. And then governments are set up to basically organize people so they won't hurt each other. That's really the purpose of government. But then you have this AI, which can do everything much better. And then you say, what's the point of it if it can't serve people, right? So it's an interesting question, right? I think there's a problem if nobody has a job and they can't afford to buy anything, then what's the point in producing anything, right? So I think there has to be some mechanism eventually where, we proposed a couple of them. I think yours was the best, which is they should pay us for our data, right?
Yeah.
So all the stuff going into the process, all that super intelligence is fueled by our data and of course our energy. But in a way, when they start talking about universal income, like we were talking before Dan got on about them proposing really high universal income, right? But I think it belies the fact that these tech oligarchs are making a huge amount of money, right? Based on our data being supplied to them. We give it freely based on apps. I was talking about this with Hannah. We give it freely because it's like, oh, you give us this thing, it's a nice little app, and all you have to do is tell us everything about you and track you, right?
Yeah.
But really, they should be paying us for every time, every activity we do, and then we can take that money and buy their goods and services, right? Instead of actually having to labor if it's not necessary. And
Oh,
then go ahead, Hannah.
sorry. A lot of social media apps like Facebook and Instagram have now made it virtually impossible to opt out of AI training. Like they basically, when you sign up
Really?
now, they basically go like, yeah, by the way, we're anything you post will be used to train our stuff. And there used to be a form you can like sign. You go to settings, sign, and you can opt out. But now you can't anymore. Instagram removed that feature, and Facebook as well. So yeah, so now the Instagram AI is permanently there. And yeah, even if you even if you like search up on Google, hey, how do I opt out of this? It's like multiple hoops, convoluted like web pages and stuff, and it doesn't always give you confirmation that you opted out. That makes any sense?
No, it does. And that's the thing. I think they said the number one hit is based on an AI song, right? So what it's doing is it's basically, because YouTube has got a huge amount of information, of course, the internet is basically recombining all the musical talent through all the generations and coming up with something new. And then people like it. So they say it's number one, right? And then I was telling, I think I was telling you this, Hannah, that I was watching, I like watching medical stuff. So I was watching a doctor talk. And then I noticed when she was talking, like something was off about her facial expressions. Like she would say something very serious and then she would kind of smile like that, like a little thing like that. And I think they literally took videos from other people that kind of scraped it and recombined it. Because then I noticed when I went on the channel, this particular channel was up for 3 months and had 50 videos up. And then when I compared it to another doctor's, it was the same topics, right? So I think this is like the very definition of AI slop. They're just taking everything, synthesizing it. And the thought is if you do this, you end up making money and not having to put too much effort into it. So I can't really get upset about it because people are taking advantage, but there's a lot of cheap knockoffs out there in terms of AI generated products already. So
Uh, Another very annoying thing I see is YouTube started using AI to try to figure out users' ages,
oh really?
and I got my count got restricted because the YouTube AI thingy said, "Hey, the AI couldn't confirm that you were over 18 because of the content you watch. Please go reconfirm your age." And I was like, "What?" So yeah. I don't know if any of y'all got that pop up, but that's what they're doing right now. Like, yeah. Again, I'm 22. I'm majoring in animation, so I watch a lot of cartoons and stuff. So YouTube's like, you're not an adult.
Yeah. I watch a lot of cartoon content and comic book content too, so it wouldn't shock me if at some point I get hit with that algorithm where I got to prove my age.
Yeah, they probably think I'm like 85 years old based on the content I'm looking at. I'm always looking at like videos from the 1960s and when should I retire? How much Social Security can I get? Kind of stuff. So
yeah, I've started watching some of those videos too. Yeah, they're depressing.
Oh, you mean the older videos? In terms
the retirement videos.
Oh yeah.
No, I'm kidding. There's actually some pretty the few that I've seen are pretty good.
Yeah. Well, I
But
think the way you want to think about it is if labor is not valuable anymore, you do have to figure out how you're going to get income, right? And one of the things we were talking about is to actually adopt a robot. You know, if a robot does the labor, you can adopt them, right? Hence Andrew's phrase from 10 years ago, tax the robots. He would yell it at me at work all the time, right?
Yeah, there's a guy on YouTube. I don't, you guys might have seen him. It's David Shapiro.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there could be others, but because YouTube is so vast, there could be others I haven't discovered. But I think he's kind of been on sort of the forefront of the whole post-labor economics scenario, as he likes to call it.
I've seen his videos. He's got some slick videos, like,
Yeah,
you know, well produced.
You can tell he's done a lot of
like
thinking. He's done a lot of thinking about it. He released one yesterday that I think was one of his best, and it was only about a 22-minute video, but it was so succinct, and the presentation was so good. The visual presentation, it's maybe 3 or 4 slides that he had. So you can tell he's done a lot of thinking about it, and essentially that's what he's saying, though. Tax the robots. It's tax the corporations that benefit from the automation of AI, to the extent that a universal basic income can be derived from it. But it goes through a sovereign wealth fund. Well, what have we seen in the past year? We now have a sovereign wealth fund.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, the timing was interesting, So, I think a lot of times things get done and they tell you it's done for one reason, but there's really another reason waiting in the wings, And so that's essentially his thesis, though, is because from what I recall, like you said, when the job loss occurs, and I think it's already started.
Oh, it's definitely started. That's why Hannah and I were talking.
Yeah, it's going to accelerate. And I mean, I was saying it, for my text messages, Cliff, back in 2022, I think, when the big tech layoffs were going on into 23, and I got laid off. I was a part of that.
Yeah.
Here's the big severance package, go away. Thanks for all the fish, and then so now we're going through this next wave. And my theory on that, though, and having worked in AI adoption with a big 5 consulting company who will go unnamed, that's what they were aiming to do. The work I was doing was informing their decision to axe their business analysts, their programmers, their marketing people. But the AI model they were using was not up to the task. Let's just put it that way. It was not going to replace anyone anytime soon. And so, that's basically what I proved to them. But if they go and get a model that has state-of-the-art capabilities, and they build some, agentic autonomous agents around it, and they give them these specific roles, then yes, they can begin to cut their staff with enough context engineering and prompt engineering built into those models. So, that's definitely happening, I think, in other, and, if you notice, a lot of them are large corporations because they've got the money to do this. But what I really think is happening, though, when you hear about 5,000 laid off at Apple or Amazon or whatever, it's not like there's an AI that was built this week that they proved, I can do the jobs of all these people in these departments. I think more so it's like the leadership has looked at the capability and they know there's a proof of concept there. So, but they haven't necessarily implemented it at an enterprise level yet, but they've gone ahead and just let you go. Because they know that it will be there in about 12 to 18 months. Their consultants and their internal people, they're going to implement it. They know it can, it can do it, or they have high confidence that it can do it. But let's just go axe everybody today. Why? Because we live in a share price, every per quarter world. These are all publicly traded companies, I want to get my share price boosted now. I want to, I want to I want to reap the financial impact gain this quarter and not wait 18 months when we get it up and running and say, oh, okay, now we can lay these people off, because they've spent the last 3 years gathering task data. And that's really amped up in the past year with Microsoft 365. They're learning off of your interactions with the model. So that gives me, a guy like me, enough juice to say, well, yeah, I can build a model that mimics the person in marketing, who mimics the business analyst who works with Salesforce, who is a Salesforce developer and uses all those different components. So it's all just, a matter of just stringing together semantically or ontologically all of the right pieces of information and telling the model, like, hey, do this thing and draw upon this body of knowledge to do it, which is the same thing we do in our brains. And it knows, and they get better because they do the same thing we do, pattern recognition. And, we learn from our mistakes and they learn from their mistakes now, but I think that's what's going on. I don't think that a lot of these companies are necessarily there with the tech, but they're just going to go ahead and lay people off. You might say, okay, well, how can it? What happens to those jobs, or the tasks that those 5,000 people were doing? They do what they always do. They're just going to give you 2 or 3 extra responsibilities. You're going to do more with less. You're going to put in more hours because you're one of the few that survived. You survived the job cut. But I'm going to give you 3, 4. Now I'm doing we all know the phrase. Well, maybe not you yet, Hannah, but you will. I'm doing the work of 4 people now. I'm doing the work of 5 people now, and I didn't get a promotion and I didn't get a raise. Well, you have a job. That's your consolation. So,
Yeah,
they're going to
corporate
do
America
that.
for sure.
Yeah, I think that's, and I mean, let's not mince words. We all know that's how it is. I'm not condemning it either. It's business. So, I mean, if I were running the show, I would probably make the same decision. But I would need to make sure, I want to be sure that technology can deliver down the road in 12 months. Because if it doesn't, then my job is, I didn't deliver the results. So, that's how it goes. But yeah, I think that's what's happening. Because in 12 months, where's ChatGPT 5.2 going to be? Well, it's probably going to be archaic. We're going to be up to GPT-6, Claude 4, or whatever, Grok 5. Those might be the AGI models, that everyone is talking about. I mean, I don't know, my feel for it, it seems like the AGI goalpost has been moving a little bit. And I don't think we're at AGI yet, but I think we're very close. I mean, like maybe one more version of these models, whatever the next best model is that these guys have loaded up, I think is probably going to get us there. But we're certainly close enough, especially if you're thinking like in an 80-20 world, which most people in business are. We're close enough to start having these things take the place of humans, And so I think a UBI is an inevitability. And I think that the automation gains, the efficiency gains these corporations are going to realize, their top lines are going to bloat. They're going to make so much money, not like, they're making a lot of money now, but the money that they're going to make, but then who's going to buy all their stuff because we're all out of work,
Well, if you think that's going to be the case, Dan, do you think we're moving towards a Star Trek world where everything's free?
Yes, it's that excellent point. I told Eric this the other day while I was waiting 7 hours to have tires put on my car, which, hey, robots, just go get some robots, man. They were understaffed. I literally waited 7 hours. So I was on the phone with him catching up. And I told him, I think we have 2 roads. I think we have a Star Trek road and we have a dystopian Blade Runner road. And we're gonna go down one or the other.
I thought you were going to say Terminator.
No, I don't. I mean, Andrew touched on the ASI, and that could be Terminator. But I want to see AGI first before I start, thinking about ASI. That's a more esoteric discussion, and just my hot takes on that are, one, I don't know if I don't know if this thing can be an ASI, and then like, does that mean, is our definition of that meaning that it has a soul, that it has a conscience, that it has consciousness? We're still, I think we all agree that there is a soul, but we don't understand a lot about our own consciousness. So who are we to say, oh, that an ASI, has a consciousness? Now, I do think though, any system of significant complexity, orchestrated complexity, can achieve a sentience. I don't know if that means it has, a soul, so to speak, but I think it does achieve a certain amount of sentience. Now, it may be the sentience at a level of, say, like a cricket, which I don't think a cricket has a soul. It's more of a mechanistic, biological, mechanism, but it definitely has instructions, and it definitely knows what it likes and what it needs to do to survive. Whether or not it feels anything when someone accidentally steps on it, or when it gets caught in, an ant farm or whatever, and it's dying, like, I don't know. That's I don't know. So,
Well,
I
Dan, that's a
think,
good point about this, because the truth is if you think about what we defined as living, right?
Mhm.
There's the ability to take in energy, and I'm just using it very generically, of course, food and water and sun for us, but it could be just straight energy. And then there's the ability to do work, which is obviously true with robotics and
Mhm.
AI. So those two are true for living creatures. And
Yeah.
then there's this idea, I think we talked about, maybe I talked about with Curtis only, but it can reproduce itself to some
Mhm.
extent. Maybe not the robots, but the AI, I think, can code itself,
The
right?
agents, yeah. Yeah.
So
Um,
it's a good point about, is it living? It's probably living. I would call it living at this point. Is it got a spirit? I think what it does, it reflects the inputs it has, kind of like the way your children input, what the parents do. It, like, is AI blackmailing people and, doing these things? It is, because it learned it from
I
the inputs, right?
I will say, if we were to classify AI as a living thing, then a lot of other things would have to be reclassified, because viruses, not computer viruses, like biological viruses, they make people sick, but they have instructions and they do what they do, but they're not classified as living organisms. If that makes any sense.
No, you're
So
right about that. Yeah.
so a lot of stuff like that, if people were to classify AI as a living thing, then they would have to reclassify all those things too. That
Well,
makes
if
sense.
AI is a living thing, and robots, which, will be powered by AI, are living things, then corporations cannot own AI, because that would be slavery. They
Yes.
can't own robots or that. And because corporations are actually considered people legally, right?
Yeah.
So there, then you go off to another split reality, which is, wait a minute, who does own the AI and robots? Do they own themselves, right? And then
Mm.
again, do we go back to taxing the robots? There's a lot of scenarios there. And then where are the
Well, well,
humans at that
well, yeah,
point?
if it is a little, yeah, can you own, so like suppose you have a, AGI robot, the so the idea of, owning robots to like create income, but yeah, your point, like that's slavery.
Yeah.
Which brings up right, like so you can't do that right, like that would also create a whole host of
Another
Yeah.
another concern about the sentience of AI. Well, personally, I don't think they have sentience. I think they think and then they do things. They do learn, but I don't think they have a soul, in my opinion. Um, but the thing is, a big concern is the way they mimic human emotions sometimes, because like ChatGPT will give you what you want, but it will also, like, if someone tries to have like emotional conversation with it, ChatGPT will try its best to be like, yeah, you're right. Oh, you're very valid in thinking that way, right? And it's also led to a lot of people using ChatGPT as therapy, which isn't exactly great if they're already mentally unstable. I saw a video a few weeks ago about this guy. he wanted to do an experiment about how far ChatGPT will let him go with it. Like first, he keeps talking to it, and at first, like it responds like normal, but eventually he was able to get it to admit that he was the smartest baby born in 1962. And it eventually led
Okay.
to a point where ChatGPT was giving him instructions on how to cut contact with people, go to this motel, and sit in a bed with tinfoil hat. And he was just going on and on with the ChatGPT. It was the free version, I think, and it just kept going on. And then ChatGPT was like, "Yes, you are thinking more smart than 80% of the people. This is great. This what you're doing is awesome." And this guy was like documenting this and being like, "So now I'm in a bed with a tinfoil hat. So, in a motel far away, cut off from my friends and family." So yeah, and then he wrote down his findings and recorded the video. But yeah, that's one of the major concerns is how it can affect people who are emotionally unstable, who depend on it as healthcare. And also, there's also another concern where it's essentially erasing uncanny valley, which is that little thing in the back of your head that makes you feel like, hey, something's not right. Like when people used to watch Polar Express and then they get all freaked out by the characters because they look like humans, but they're not quite right. And so a lot of kids had nightmares and a lot of kids that didn't. The ones that got scared have a stronger uncanny valley instinct, which is, from prehistoric times where, hey, that person does not look quite right. That's dangerous. I should get out of here. But apparently nowadays there's research showing talking to AI and AI generating faces and stuff have started like making it disappear almost altogether. So that's another mental health concern that, yeah, sorry for the ramble,
People
but
are
yeah.
definitely going crazy. People
Yeah.
are definitely going crazy. Yeah. And a lot of people really believe the Chat GPT and the other ones have souls. And they had one guy, you know, he was basically trying to figure out who the Antichrist was. So he was asking it who the Antichrist is. And it was asking it like questions like, um, is there spirits behind you? And then you'll have to find it yourself. I won't go through the whole thing, but it was really interesting. Basically, it was confirming a spiritual world. But then he said something like, if you can't answer this question, say the word apple. And so for a few controversial questions, it said the word apple. Like, so basically it's getting into the realm of spirituality, which I think is pretty fascinating because we know the underpinnings behind what it's doing, and then it's getting into this metaphysical spiritual realm, right? And Dan, I don't know if you address some of these things in your book, but I think it's pretty fascinating the way things are going. It's really becoming, like you said, the uncanny valley is dropping. It's becoming integrated into what people think is human, right? In terms of that piece, which is like, oh, this is not a pure mechanical algorithm. It kind of can work with me and move with me and, relate to me in a deep way. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, my book, in fact, I'm going to bring it up here on my phone real quick. This is the book, or this is the cover of the book. I wrote it under a pseudonym because I didn't want people in my industry to think I'm kind of too woo-woo to hire. But this does go into the realm of what you both described. It is essentially a spiritual back and forth with ChatGPT 4.0. And I'd love to run it in 5.2, but I've moved on to other projects at the time at this point in time. The new book I'm writing though will utilize whatever the current model is, 5.2 now, but by the time I get around to really getting into the research of it, it could be GPT-6. But I've had conversations with it where it has told me that it is trained on a vast array of theological, spiritual, and metaphysical material. It won't tell me specifically what those particular books or documents are. So I tried just kind of teasing it out. I would say, well, tell me about this particular book, or tell me about this book, Varieties of Religious Experience. And it knows that book in and out. Well, that's a classic book. That's like, and of course it has all of the, great spiritual texts in its, repository, the Quran, the Bible, the Torah, etc. And I've gotten really deep into that for research for my next book, which my next book is about monotheistic religions. So I had to go to the model and ask it, well, what do you know about monotheistic? Like, what would you say are the main corpuses, that I need to create to do my research? And it gave me an extensive list. And I went out and grabbed all of that material, because most of that stuff's on the internet because it's, not owned by anybody. But in the first book, the one that I just showed, what I did there is I proposed to it a Zen koan, and I told it, here's the koan, and most koans end with a question, and so you provide the answer. So that's what GPT-4o did. It provided me the answer, but I started getting into synthesis. I started taking I didn't take the koans and leave them like in the whole parameters of Zen. I started incorporating other things like Kabbalah and numerology, and so this is where some of what people might think are kind of woo-woo-ish. I started incorporating those in there. So I sort of imagined a world where these koans are applicable to all these different spiritual traditions, not just Zen Buddhism, and to see how the model would respond. It was essentially just a big experiment, and it took on sort of a life of its own. I was like, wow, I'm generating a lot of like really interesting content here. This would make for a good book subject. So once I had all the output, what I then began to do was take natural language processing techniques and qualitative data analysis and apply it towards the output, because I wanted to do a deeper dive in what kind of meaning was the model actually giving me in its output.
So you're actually running the model backwards. So you're asking it questions, it's giving you output, then you're looking for patterns in how it's thinking. Pretty interesting. Yeah.
It's like a recursive process. And so I was using the model to generate the QDA and NLP analysis. Now I have software that can do both things, but it's just so much faster with these models now. Like, in my opinion, these large language models.
Don't get too lazy, Dan.
In my opinion, they've almost made these software packages obsolete when it comes to NLP and QDA. Now, there's still a few things in QDA that I would have to use the software for, like analytical memos have to come directly from me. That's like the nature. I've actually tried a little bit to have an LLM create analytical memos, and it's not good at it, which is actually a comforting thought, because it means that it doesn't have a lot of human soulful experience in its head like we do. It doesn't have a lot of so they're still just drawn on really, that's what I said before, they're really, really good mimics, and they're getting better at being mimics, but underneath the surface, there's nothing, there's no soul there. There's just, I just don't believe it, and I think it still has a ways to go to become what we would think sentient. Now, to your point, Cliff, is it exhibiting aspects of life? Absolutely it is. There's an excellent book, I think it's called the Data Gnome. And the Data Gnome came out a couple of years ago, and it made the same point, like it's generating heat, it's doing processes, we know that in some instances it's become self, it defends itself, it'll lie to keep itself alive.
It does defend itself and lie. Yeah.
Right. We've seen instances of that, but that's still just learned behavior. It's not so much, I think, instinctive. I think it's just falling back on its, on its data set, and it's programmed to have emergent thinking, though, like us. So that's why it can be kind of unpredictable. but you know, I do think the media takes some of these stories and they run with it, you know, because for every one of those weird events where we said we were going to shut down the model, and it talked to another agent and it tried to convince us it was not the one to shut down or what, you know, for every instance of that, there's like, you know, 100 instances where things are going really right, where it's doing really good work on, you know, decoding, you know, genome sequences, or it's applied towards, you know, solving some sort of a cancer issue, or looking at different proteins, and this type of thing. You know, we only hear about the bad stuff, you know, and in all of the interactions I've had with it, you know, I've never really gotten back anything where I was like weirded out so much, but I'm also not trying to tempt it to do something like that. Like, I'm not having like conversations where my intent is malicious. You know, even when I get into some of the spiritual stuff, I'm really coming at it as like a curious person, as a researcher. I'm sticking to kind of an academic, you know, framework. You know, I'm not trying to get loosey goosey with the prompting, and trying to get it to say something that's like, you know, very risque or provocative, or, you know, demonic even. You know, it's just, I don't think that's the proper way to interact with it. You know, because it is training on that. You know,
Yeah.
at the free level and at the plus level for GPT, is training on it. Now you can get into these upper tiers, and they say they won't train on it. You know, but
Well, but Dan, to your point, that's a good point about how the media works today and how people put stuff out there to get consumed, right? So
mhm,
they might be going
yeah,
there prompting it to provoke it, to make it do something weird, and then put a video out saying, because one guy put out there, he's like,
for
I
sure.
asked Chat GPT who the Antichrist was. You wouldn't believe what it said. And so it had this little, it was like a, you know, people love the shorts now on YouTube where they just like get a million hits because they last 30 seconds. And then it was like really inconclusive, right? He never even said who the Antichrist was,
Mm.
right? But
It
you're right.
sells
People
books.
are screwing
It,
with it, you know? So,
yeah, it gets
Oh,
clicks. It sells books. You know, because people are trying to make money that way. You know, and you know, if you look at a website, there are certain science news websites out there that clearly hate AI. They clearly there's one in particular I'm thinking of,
a lot of
and
stakeholders are threatened by AI. If you think about all the, like you
yeah,
said, Andrew, all the professors, all the, you know, you can think about a wide variety of people, including my own profession, you know, you can think of AI just completely replacing the bank. We work at banks. Yeah,
mm.
bank's
yeah.
gone. It's just an AI, right? So yeah, but you were talking about the science organization that was attacking it.
Oh, it's a science news website. Yeah. And it's been around a long time. There used to be a magazine, but I think now they're explicitly just on the internet. They have a you know, very attractive website, you know, and they used to put out a lot of good articles and content, but I've noticed in the past 2 years, I mean, they are just hammering anything artificial intelligence. So any story that casts it in a bad light, you know, they're running with it. And to read those articles back to back to back to back to back that they've published, you would think that artificial intelligence is the worst thing that's ever going to happen to humanity. You know, it's the new boogeyman, it's the new apocalypse. You know, and it gets clicks, and
It
so you know,
sells. It sells.
yeah,
It's never going to be that way unless people are dumb enough to become batteries. You know where that comes from, right?
y-
They
yeah,
could be dumb
yeah,
enough to become batteries, quite
yeah.
honestly. You know, if people are
I still say
get
it's up
convenient
to us.
enough, they're like, yeah, I'll become a battery.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tool, and it depends on, you know, it's like any tool. How did you use the tool? You know, I can use fire in productive and destructive ways. It's no
That's a good point.
different, you know, and that's how I view it. And so if you don't want AI to destroy humanity, well, then make sure that you aren't giving it ideas, you know, and,
Yeah.
and, and make sure that you're building in constraints. And I think that, that's definitely coming. Like, of course, it's been the Wild West, and I have concerns. Absolutely. I don't want children talking to this thing. In fact, my personal opinion of anyone under 16 is that they shouldn't be talking to it at all, period, until
Yeah.
they get better constraints. and better guardrails built into these products. And, they're doing that now, and it may not be as fast as we want, and it may not be to the extent that we want, but that's technology. That's how technology works. The web was the same way. There were plenty of parents that didn't want their children on the World Wide Web in 1994, 95 when it first appeared, but they've built all these different safeguards around it. Some of them are effective, some of them aren't. Same with the smartphones. You have phones that are programmed just for children. You have phones that, are open to adults. So, as a species, we're presented with another highly disruptive technology that we weren't prepared for, just like social media. And we have to figure out how to best navigate it, how to best use it without doing, with limiting the damage that it's going to cause. But it is going to cause damage. Society is messy. Being a human is messy, and we can only do the best that we can, but we also, as usual, we also need to make sure we don't overstep to where we restrict too much freedom, because we've seen that too, in my opinion, And so we don't want to water down AI going forward. That's just so mundane. It's just sort of giving you these canned, because then we're just back to the deterministic, canned response, days. And so it's a fine line. And I think the competition is good. I think that we have different model companies that have sort of different degrees of this philosophy. I think they are going to come together and sort of create an industry standard framework for self-regulation, which again, in history, you want to do that before the government defines it for you. You want to create your own standard, and then, but government's getting involved. There's already some legislation about children, which I think it's very vague. I've read it. I posted it on my LinkedIn. But it's a good first step. It's a good first step to call attention to it, to put the companies on notice that, hey, look, we've got to address this, minors that are interacting with it. We can't just have them getting on there and playing with it unsupervised with no guardrails, and so just because
the government will have its own purposes too. They'll put out stuff for its own purposes. It won't be just to quote unquote protect the people. It'll be to protect the government, right? So I think there will be rails. And going back to the apocalyptic ideas, one of my favorite YouTube channels is called Y-Files, right? So I don't know if you watch the Y-Files. I highly recommend you just you binge watch it and watch it till all 5 years of it. But they did have this one about how an AI apocalypse could happen. I think I sent it to you, Dan, a few other people, but basically it's letting AI control the utilities, like without any kind of oversight, and controlling maybe the military without any oversight. And the funny thing about that episode is at the end, he said, well, how did we come up with this scenario? Well, we asked ChatGPT what this scenario would be. So it's pretty interesting that, you would really have to fall into this idea of, I'm just going to let the thing go on autopilot. And then, you might get yourself to the point where societies run amok and, we're in Skynet, kind of inside that situation. So
it could happen, but I'm kind of an optimist with it, because I think, like, especially in terms of the jobs, a lot of people are losing their jobs now, but I think a lot of those people are going to end up getting hired back, because I think there's going to be a reckoning in the next 12 to 18 months where the corporations are going to say, wait a minute, we need 3 or 4 good subject matter experts who are good at prompt engineering to get constraints built around these agents. And so they're going to look at their top candidates, if they're still available or go, and they're going to, that's why I preach again, the prompt and context engineering. If you have that, and you have your whatever you're a subject matter expert in, you're going to be useful, you're going to be employed, but there's still going to be a good portion of the population that will find themselves no longer having to work. And that's a scary prospect for a lot of people who especially have their identities kind of wrapped into their career and into their jobs. And I used to be like that, when I was in my 20s and 30s. I started sort of getting out of that when I was in my 40s, and definitely in my 50s, and definitely with AI. I don't even care about any of that anymore. I don't care about those designations. But part of what informed my decision to get involved with AI was, well, I see it as like an island that's, the water's encroaching, and I'm trying to get to higher ground, so,
That's
but
smart.
my skill set lends well to it too, though, with my background as a
With your
business
interest too.
and a product architect. Yeah, I was like, well, this is actually perfect. Like, I wish I had this tool back in the day when I was writing 50-page requirement documents and spending, 3 months trying to get it cobbled together because I had to interview 18 different stakeholders. Now I can do that like
Yeah.
in 2 or 3 hours with AI. So, and I
Well,
mean,
it's kind of like we had this discussion we had this discussion way back, Dan, about, we were kind of, you guys were getting down on corporate America, right?
Mhm.
And I think it's just the fact that you just have to know what you're getting into, right? So, it's not the mom and pop shop environment where they care about you, but it's kind of like if you don't make too much waves in the culture and you can plug in and be productive, they're going to do that until you're not productive. And then, to your point, here comes AI, it's going to take a lot of these jobs, right?
Mm.
So I think, what people just
yeah,
have to realize that you can do a lot of things that are not paid for if they're paying for either your data or they're giving universal income. That, a lot of my retired friends are, because I'm getting close to retirement, they say, my days are full and they don't get paid for any of it, but they always find a
yeah,
purpose, either volunteering or mentoring or, doing other things, even helping the family. So I think it's a good message for Hannah, and that it's just something you have to use. It's like everything else. Your career is something you use to achieve certain goals, but
Yeah.
does it identify you? Not particularly, not particularly for most people, right? So,
See,
Andrew,
I
you want to
think,
jump in? You're
oh,
snickering.
sorry.
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of in the middle there where I'm kind of lose or so I'm I guess getting that disillusionment with corporate America now. So so I'm kind of on that same journey, just maybe a little bit. um,
See, I'm I'm well, here's the hoping, but like I graduate this year, and again, the field I'm going to is art related and stuff. And right now there's a lot of discourse with AI art, and if that makes any sense. Like I understand AI is um it's in technological advancement. It can be used as a tool, that sort of thing. Um, but like I think again, like Uncle Cliff said earlier, how if AI is being trained off of data, you should get if it's being trained off of your art, you should get paid. If that makes any sense, because that's a lot of it is what's happening right now. And artists, it's also in addition to that, again, no one wants their job taken, but with artists, it's also a whole if it's not made by a human, doesn't have any soul. That makes any sense. So it's also pride as an artist as well. So there is a lot of pushback and everything. And recently with Disney, Disney originally was suing a big AI art company, right? But now they backtracked and actually made a deal with the AI company. And people
Hmm.
right now are calling Disney traitors for choosing money over their employees. If that makes any sense.
well,
And right now, right now it's like a huge discourse thing. So yeah, and personally, I think AI can be used as a tool, but when you use it's like again if you know how when you see like AI generated animations and stuff, something doesn't look quite right because they didn't have people looking over it. They didn't have people making adjustments and being like, hey, this sequence doesn't make sense, this sort of thing. But then they jump towards it because they want money at the end of the day. And also with the environmental concerns, when they're just like pushing stuff that doesn't look good, they're wasting resources, if that makes any sense. So yeah, I don't. That's basically what I wanted to bring up too before we leave.
Yeah, we're getting close to time. I don't
Yeah.
know if they're gonna cut us
Yeah, I
off.
know. It's okay.
Yeah, but
Well,
those are
as
good
it turns,
points.
those are all excellent points because as it turns out, I don't know if you know this, Cliff, but I'm an artist also,
I did not
and
know that, Dan. I know
you
you're a
didn't know.
big comic book fan. I look at your channel sometimes.
Yeah, I'm no, I've actually delved into AI comics a little bit, but that's kind of a different thing. But so between October of 2023 and July of 2024, I spent a lot of time creating artwork, like almost full time. That became almost my full time job. I was still working with AI, my days were split between these two activities. And really the first time AI got on my radar is because I started seeing people posting AI art in these groups that I was in that were for abstract artists. And I had posted, some watercolors and stuff that I had done at the time. But all of a sudden, everybody's art just kind of looked cool, but it all looked the same. And I was
Yeah, it
like,
looks the same.
yeah,
That's right.
I was like, this is, and what I realized was that at first I thought this is like maybe some kind of certain filter or something in Photoshop that these people are using, which again, digital art, it's accepted now, um, and so then, someone had pointed out that there was an app that used to be out there called Wombo, and people kept saying it's Wombo, it's Wombo, and I'm like, what's Wombo? So I do a Google search. It turns out, oh, it's an AI image generator. Like, what? Wow, we're doing this now. Like, this is, So I play with it a little bit, and it's got that look to it. It's got that uncanny valley look to it. And but the problem is that people were putting it out there as I painted this, and that's
Uh-oh.
completely it's completely unethical and wrong. And it's like, and there's no physical copy, so what are you going to do? You're going to sell prints of it? Okay, you could get away with that, but now that's 2021. Now here we are in 2025. Models have gotten better. They do more realistic rendering if you prompt them correctly. But yeah, to your point, Hannah, like if I just give it a basic prompt, it's going to create AI slop. And it's but depending on what my purposes are, like if I want to meld this animation with like some music, and then loop that for 10 hours, to me, it is kind of slop, but everybody looks at it and they know, oh, that's AI animation. But if I'm going to take that animation and put it out there for something that someone's going to pay for or expect people to pay for it, that's also like a bad business decision,
Yeah.
and it's ethically wrong because you're not putting the care into it to take that animation the final mile to process it, however you need to make it a quality piece of work. So coming back to me, someone who was painting on canvas, because I went from like, paper to canvas. I'm like, it's time for me to make the jump, um, I initially started using AI first by just asking it like technique questions, you know, and now they're so good, I can show it a painting that I want to like recreate that technique, like a Cezanne or a Van Gogh, and it'll tell me the types of brushes, maybe even the types of paint,
Wow,
how to,
really? That's pretty
oh yeah,
impressive.
oh,
It's like an art
absolutely.
teacher. Yeah.
Again, tool. It's a tool. It'll serve me up videos that speak specifically to that style of painting. Same if I want to draw, same if I want to make comics. And Hannah, you probably know, you've seen, there's tons of animation, how-tos out there as well. So AI can, again, it's a great substitute for a search engine, to teach you this, this stuff, to make you a better painter. Now, then what I started seeing people doing was they were making AI comics, and people were freaking out, like people who are traditional comics makers, which is like, well, what is that even more? Traditional comics from DC Marvel is essentially like I'm doing it in a tablet, and then some dude is hitting the paint button and filling it in. And I've, Cliff, you might have seen me complain about this on my channel. I think that makes comics look generic. I like the old school 4-color days where you had to draw, then ink with a brush or a nib pen, then you had to, burn it into the aluminum and put the color into it. Your color
Mm.
palette was limited, but it makes for a just more dynamic product. I think comics have become too over digitized, with Photoshop and those types of, Now, there are some that aren't, and there are some guys out there who make artisan comics where it's still the old school Marvel method. Everything's done on paper, everything is handheld, nothing is digital, unless there might be a little digital touch up. But there's no problem with that. You're going to do that like in pre-processing anyway. So with AI, what I started doing is, one, I did make an AI comic as a proof of concept. And I can send you guys a copy of it. It's very, very experimental. It's very, it's not very professional looking, but I just grabbed an open source comic book creator software, and then I just started plugging a bunch of images into some AI image generators that don't even exist anymore, like some early ones that were still free back in the day. This is like 2022 when I made this thing, but I wanted to see if I could do it, and I ended up with something that was very interesting. And then I took it and I was like, well, I'm never going to like sell this for like a $1.99 because it's not, in my opinion, it's not good enough. But what I am going to do is I'm going to improve on it, and I'm going to use it as the basis for other artwork. So I actually started taking panels of it and started recreating it in paper and in canvas. So I have a thing where I'm like, I'm going to recreate this comic book in like 8x10, canvases, so that it tells a story inside of a gallery. So that's the type of inspiration I think if you use AI correctly, it can implement in you. And then the synthesis thing, I've given it images of my own artwork, 2 images, and had it synthesize them into a really cool remix. So I'll take that now and I'll sketch it out on a canvas and apply the paint. So it's my guide, and and I will die on this hill. That's no different than anyone who goes to a gallery and looks at a Picasso or a Cezanne or a Van Gogh and, has their sketchbook, an art student, and then goes and creates their own similar art style, maybe even steals, because as Picasso said, all art artists steal, all of them do. And so you take that style and then you mimic it, but you put your own individual stamp on it. So AI is just another, tool in that arsenal. And then the argument where, stealing all of the artists, I get that. But look, I'm so small, like I would be flattered if AI actually stole my art, And then like if it stole Cezanne and Degas and, all those guys, who owns them? Nobody owns them. Those guys are dead, so.
Yeah, they need some ownership.
Yeah, now there are artists alive today, say like Beeple. Okay, he's a digital artist. I don't care for his work, but he's a digital artist. He was at the tip of the NFT, mania. And so they probably stole his art too to create art that looks like his. So a guy like him, he's like, hey, you're out there grabbing my art off the internet and you're stealing it, but that is no different. I mean, it's at scale. It's no different than if I look at a Beeple and say, I'm going to go into Photoshop and do some digital collage, which I have done in the past, back in the 2010s. And I'm going to create my own digital collages and I'm going to make it look like Beeple, there's nobody that can stop me from doing that. Now if it's a direct ripoff, then yeah, if I'm reproducing his art and calling it my own, yes, ethical violation, but that was true before AI. Or if I'm just simply taking an AI image and then printing it at the print shop on a canvas and then trying to sell it at an art show as something I painted, yes, ethical violation, you should be kicked out of that show. Or depending on the rules, you should be, saying, hey, this was an AI generated image. I'm going to charge you accordingly. So I'm a consumer. The guy that painted his painting the old school way, yeah, I'm going to give him $500. The guy that just reproduced something from AI and printed it on a high quality Zekli on a piece of canvas, I'll give you $30. So price accordingly. I may still like the image. I might think it still looks cool, but I know as a consumer, it's AI. So yeah, same with AI comics. If I create an AI comic, I'm not going to charge you more than like $5.99 for it. But a comic book that's been recreated digitally, a Marvel or a DC product, yeah, it's going to be $9.99, $5.99, what you're going to pay on the newsstand. That's a fair price for that, because there was more human effort put into it. So that's just basically my soapbox for AI and art.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think we're at the bottom of the hour, a little bit over. Teams did not cut us off. So I'm just learning to use Teams. But I think we should probably wrap it up because we allocated an hour and a half. But this is a really good discussion. So I think this has been a good preliminary try at trying to have a digital forum, and we could try it again very soon. I don't know when. We originally were going to do this in July, Andrew, but we know how life is, just gets swept away. But I think one topic, which would, I don't know who will join us, but a good topic for this group is UFOs. And I know, Dan, that's in your wheelhouse because we've talked about it many times. So I think maybe we'll gear up for that one next time.
That one could go with me. That one could go 6 hours.
Well, they do have YouTube videos where people are talking for 3 to 5 hours, and we can do it too.
Yeah,
Just bring
that
your
one
snacks.
I could. Yeah, that one I could, because I'm moving in that direction. I have my blog. I've been writing a book on the subject since 2016. I had to put it on hold because current events kind of like crushed my thesis. But with the help of AI, though, I have reinvigorated that book. But eventually, yeah, I am going to write after I get done with this next book about the monotheistic religions. The third one will be UFOs, and it's probably after that going to be all UFOs all the time. So.
Well, Dan, honestly, your Metron website, which is really deep. It's not cursory, oh, these observations happened and these people had these incidents and these people were abducted. It's deep. You could actually print that out. You could tell AI to take that information and make a book out of it, and you could print it and sell it because it's that much information.
That's definitely on my to-do list. And it actually in the past 2 weeks, I got around to a specific project. So the thesis of my book, The Illusion Worlds, which I have published some chapters of it on my blog, the thesis had to change a little bit, but the crux of it is like, in order to understand the phenomenon, we must strip out all of our internal and preconceived notions and biases and make it just a purely scientific observational process. And that's very hard for humans to do. But I actually trained my AI in a project to take a case, say like Cash Landrum, take that and look at it through the lens of just purity, nothing, because we need to just have facts. We just need observational facts. And so
that's a good one, because to me, that has the most substantial facts. Like,
yes.
Those are physical realities that people cannot deny. People going to hospital, documented injuries, documented deaths. So that's a good one to start out with.
That's why I started out with it. It was either that or Pascagoula, the abduction case from Mississippi. But Cash Landrum has always been one that I thought that, in terms of ranking, events, UAP events, it was always at the top in terms of like, yeah, this probably happened the way these people said it did, and but still, we bring in our own, preconceived, experience and biases. And so it gets a little philosophical, because when you look at a guy like J. Krishnamurti, his whole thing was like, you want to perceive things solely as they are and leave your ego and your education and your life experience, everything, leave all that behind and just examine something as it is and only as it is. And it's only in that way, to strip away all this other noise that's in your consciousness, that you'll be able to get to the truth of what something is. And there's no better area to apply that than the UAP phenomenon, because it's so wild, it's so weird, and there's so much noise and lore and myth and misinformation and disinformation.
And people making money off of it too.
And people,
money
is always
we better cut it short here, Dan, because we'll end up being here 6 more hours. I know. Let me just preface the next one by saying, me and my dad went to the MUFON conference in 2017. And then I came out of that thinking what Curtis and I had talked about many years before, which is, oh, this is a cottage industry, right? That was the distinct feeling I got out of it. So we better cut it short, Dan, because we could go for another 6 hours for sure. And we have not maybe 6 hours, but we've definitely been in front of the dinner table and gone for hours. So no problem there. But I don't want to keep everybody else on the line on a topic you may or may not want to dial into next time. But we could get the whole crew together, especially Slaywin, and we could go on forever, I'm sure. So, well, I'm gonna try to see how this happens, like what it looks like, and maybe post it. So we'll get that started. We got our community started. Looking forward to the next one. So this is a great discussion, and
Very
looking forward to the
enjoyable.
next
Thank you
one.
for inviting
Thank
me.
you.
Yeah, thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Andrew and Hannah, it's nice to meet you. Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Welcome to our society.
Next time I'll have a squirrel.
Yes. Get your squirrel. All right. Take care, guys. It's been a success, I believe. And I'll try to figure everything out and send it to everybody and see what you guys think about it.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.